What happened to Rebornica? Because if you were anywhere near the Five Nights at Freddy's fandom in 2014 and 2015, you knew who Rebornica was. They were one of the biggest artists in the entire fandom. Their version of Purple Guy, Vincent, basically became fandom canon for an entire generation of fans before the games even gave the character an official identity, and then one day, they were just gone. But why? And the answer to that question is one of those stories where you keep having to stop and go, wait, no, it gets worse. From manipulation to harassment to sexual conversations with minors, and a years-long trail of fandom drama so severe that entire archives, timelines, and call-out blogs had to be built just to document all of it. And the wildest part is that almost every time you think the story has finally reached the bottom, it somehow finds a new floor. There is a joke people make online. Take a shot every time someone in the FNAF community comes out as a child predator. And as awful as that joke is, it exists for a reason, because behind all the nostalgia people have for early FNAF fandom, there were stories like this hiding underneath it the entire time. And this is the story of Rebornica, one of the most infamous collapses in early internet fandom history. Before all of this, Rebornica was basically just another kid online making fan content. Their real name is Jillian. They were born on May 8, 1998. They're from Malaysia, and over the years they went by a ridiculous number of usernames online. Rebornica, MX Bones, Bones, Voltergeist, Nefarious Skull, Shy Guy Princess, and a bunch of others. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just calling them Rebornica throughout this video. Back around 2011 to 2012, they were about 13 years old and completely obsessed with Minecraft, which honestly described like half the internet at that point. Most of their early online presence was just posting drawings, interacting with fandom spaces, and working on this little webcomic called Friends with a Creeper. And even back then, they were already building a pretty decent audience for someone that young. By late 2012, they had around 600 DeviantArt watchers, which does not sound impressive now, but for a 13-year-old making Minecraft comics before any kind of viral breakout, that was actually pretty solid growth. Eventually, they handed the comic off to two other users, Mitting Mouse and XX Acanthia XX, who posted a few more pages and then basically disappeared off the internet, which honestly feels extremely accurate to early 2010s fandom culture. And before FNAF entered the picture, there really was not much major controversy surrounding them either. And then Five Nights at Freddy's came out. And honestly, early FNAF fandom was the perfect environment for somebody like Rebornica to blow up, because the games barely had concrete lore yet. Purple Guy was literally just a purple sprite in a minigame. Nobody fully knew who anybody was. Scott Cawthon kept giving people tiny little pieces of information without fully explaining anything, which meant the fandom immediately started filling in the gaps themselves. At the same time, the community was growing ridiculously fast, and everybody was desperate for characters and personalities to latch onto. So on September 7th, 2014, Rebornica posted a set of sketches called Mike the Night Watch. It was their own interpretation of Mike Schmidt. And looking back now, the idea itself really was not that complicated. Mike had an actual personality. He argued with the animatronics. He had relationships with other characters. There were running jokes, expressions, dialogue, character quirks, so much more than usual. It gave people something emotional to attach themselves to outside the games themselves. And because the fandom was so desperate for literally any characterization at that point, the post blew up almost immediately. Then, FNAF 2 was released, and suddenly there were even more characters to work with, more lore to interpret, more gaps for fan creators to fill in, and Rebornica just kept building on top of it. And then Vincent showed up, which is really the point where this stopped being popular fandom AU and became something way bigger than that. Because if you were anywhere near the FNAF fandom in 2014 or 2015, there is a very good chance you saw this character somewhere. Vincent was Rebornica's version of Purple Guy, completely purple skin, white eyes and teeth, yellow security badge, weird obsession with toast, scared of needles and loud noises, and somehow all of those details combined into one of the single most recognizable fan interpretations in early FNAF history. People got insanely attached to this version of the character. And honestly, one of the weirdest parts is that Vincent still has cultural leftovers from that era. If you search Purple Guy even now, years later, Vincent still shows up in image results. That is how deeply this interpretation embedded itself into the fandom. But there was also another side to the AU that people started becoming uncomfortable with pretty quickly, especially the dynamic between Vincent and Phone Guy. A lot of their interactions were built around Vincent jolly harassing him, and while people kept pointing that out, Rebornica was also publicly insisting that that was not what the dynamic was supposed to be, and then immediately posting drawings that looked exactly like that dynamic anyway, which made the whole thing increasingly uncomfortable once people started stepping back and looking at it critically. Of course, this brings us to January 9th, 2015, which is where things start shifting into something much messier and much more personal, because this is when a Tumblr user named FooX posted a public call out against Rebornica linking two separate documents. One of the documents was written by somebody named Ash, who who now goes by Kurt. Most of that document is gone now and only fragments still exist in archives, and even those were later edited with notes saying the situation had apparently been resolved privately afterward. The second document, though, was written by Fu, and that one survived almost completely. The thing is absurdly long, like genuinely absurd, 177,000 words long. For context, that is longer than a lot of published novels. And technically, the central conflict was about a fictional roleplay relationship between two original characters ending, which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, until you actually start reading the document and realize the roleplay itself was never really the point. The roleplay was just the thing that exposed how unhealthy the friendship behind the scenes had apparently become. Rebornica and Fu had been roleplaying together using their original characters, Polywoman and Toxin. Eventually, Fu decided they wanted to stop because neither of them was really using those characters anymore. That should have been a normal conversation. Instead, according to the screenshots and logs in the document, it spiraled into weeks of emotional escalation, guilt tripping, self-threat, and repeated attempts to pull the conversation back into conflict every time Fu tried to leave peacefully. A lot of the messages follow the exact same cycle over and over again. At one point, according to the document, Rebornica allegedly tells Fu that ending the roleplay could worsen Fu's depression and potentially push them towards suicide. There are also repeated threats of self-harm throughout the logs, which makes the entire thing increasingly uncomfortable the further you get into it. Eventually, Fu cut contact with Rebornica entirely after all of this, although interestingly enough, the two apparently reconciled a few months later and became friends again for at least some period afterward. After that, Fu eventually disappeared from Tumblr completely, and from there, the public trail mostly goes cold. But the bigger issue is that this entire situation has established a pattern that people were going to keep noticing over and over again during the next few years, especially when it came to emotional escalation and self becoming tied to interpersonal conflicts online, because only about a month later, another situation happened that pushed things even further. In February 2015, Rebornica posted a photo of their wrist directly to their public Tumblr account with no warning attached. The caption essentially to continue self-harming every time somebody posted in their tag. From the surrounding posts at the time, it appears this may have been directed at Fu because one of Rebornica's friends had recently mentioned Fu continuing to post about them publicly. But honestly, regardless of who it was aimed at, the reaction from people was pretty immediate because posting graphic self-harm publicly during an online conflict crossed a line for a lot of people watching all of this happen in real time. And unfortunately, this would not be the last time self-harm or threats of self-harm became part of conflicts surrounding Rebornica online. By mid-2015, the situation around Rebornica had stopped being occasional fandom discourse and had turned into this constant cycle where every new conflict immediately created three more, because around May 2015, two people named Zachary and Chris created a Tumblr blog dedicated entirely to documenting things Rebornica had allegedly done. At first, it was just another criticism blog, which Tumblr had a million of back then, but almost immediately, the same pattern started happening again. People would send asks to Rebornica about the blog. Rebornica would publicly answer those asks. Their followers would go looking for the blog would get flooded with harassment, the moderators would change the blog name to avoid it, Rebornica would post a new name publicly, and then the harassment would start all over again. Just this constant feedback loop where every attempt to avoid attention somehow created even more of it. And then on May 27th, things escalated way past internet drama. One of the moderators, Zachary, attempted suicide. He survived, but at the time people didn't know that yet, and almost immediately a wave of users started blaming Rebornica directly for what happened. Rebornica responded by posting statements on both Tumblr and DeviantArt denying responsibility and listing out all the things Zachary had supposedly done wrong. And honestly, even outside the larger situation, one of the strangest parts of those posts is what happened in the replies afterward, because fans started showing up to comfort Rebornica, and instead of de-escalating things or avoiding specifics, Rebornica started directly naming users they believed were spreading misinformation, which is kind of unbelievable when you think about the context here, because the entire reason people were angry in the first place was that publicly directing a large audience towards specific individuals had already contributed to somebody spiraling into a sewer slide attempt. And then, while addressing the fallout from that exact situation, they did the same thing again. And a few months later, that pattern collided with the single most infamous thing Rebornica ever posted online. On August 6th, 2015, Rebornica announced on Tumblr that people were no longer allowed to draw Vincent fan art, which immediately became an argument, because Vincent technically wasn't an original character in the normal sense. He was a fan interpretation of Purple Guy from Five Nights at Freddy's, which meant people started arguing over whether Rebornica could actually control how other fans used the design at all. Most people ignored the request quietly, but two artists didn't. Artists named Illogical Void and Tabordoodle both publicly acknowledged the request and then openly said they were still going to keep drawing Vincent anyway. There was also another user who started posting long explanations about copyright law and why fan interpretations of existing franchise characters are a legally complicated territory in the first place, which, to be fair, was probably legally correct, but also turned the conversation into the most Tumblr argument imaginable. When Rebornica saw the responses from Illogical Void and Tabordoodle, they posted about how upsetting the whole situation was becoming and mentioned feeling close to relapsing because people would not stop using the design. Illogical Void basically responded with, "Get well soon." Tabordoodle responded significantly less gently, but even that wasn't the part people still remember years later. Because the next day, August 7th, Rebornica uploaded a comic trying to explain their feelings about people continuing to use Vincent after being asked not to. And inside the comic was the analogy. "Sweetheart, if someone makes something and shows it to everyone, it doesn't mean you and the public own it, especially if they later on say not to use it. I'm going to go this far. That's like saying you can still have sex with a person later on despite them saying no because they said yes in the past." And yeah, people lost their minds over this immediately because even people who agreed with the Rebornica's frustration thought comparing fan art copyright disputes to actual consent was an absolutely wild thing to do. Rebornica later defended the post by saying people misunderstood the analogy and that they were just trying to explain consent and boundaries in a way people would understand. But by that point, the damage was already done, and the post became one of the defining screenshots attached to their reputation online for years afterward. And then 2016 happened, which is where the entire tone of this story changes again. From here onward, the situations start becoming much more personal, and the ages of the people involved start mattering a lot more too. The first example is weirdly small compared to everything else, but it says a lot. Sometime around the sister location announcement in 2016, a fan sent Rebornica a completely harmless ask asking if they'd heard about the new FNAF game. Rebornica had already distanced themselves from FNAF publicly at this point and apparently had rules asking people not to bring it up anymore. So their response was, "Did you hear about my fist going through your skull?" The person who sent the ask turned out to be 13 years old. Rebornica later said they apologized privately once they realized the person's age and hadn't known beforehand. But even with that context, people still looked at the situation sideways because the initial response to a pretty innocent fan question was immediately aggressive in a way that felt disproportionate. And only a few months later came the Stormai situation. Rebornica and an ex-girlfriend named Stormai broke up sometime in mid-2016, and shortly afterward, Rebornica publicly accused Stormai of outing them to their father through Facebook messages. And to be clear, if that happened the way it was described, that would have been an incredibly serious thing to do, especially considering Rebornica lives in Malaysia, where LGBTQ+ people can face very real legal and social consequences. But then people started pushing back with older posts where Rebornica had described their father as supportive, including stories about him defending their gender identity personally. Rebornica later clarified that their father hadn't believed the messages anyway. Stormai eventually apologized publicly and claimed she hadn't understood she was outing Rebornica when she sent the messages, but once again, people became less focused on the original conflict and more focused on how Rebornica handled it publicly. Because the screenshots they posted included Stormai's uncensored full name, fans immediately started going after her, and then afterward, Rebornica made another post telling people not to harass Stormai, which felt extremely familiar at this point, because it followed almost the exact same structure as the Zachary situation earlier. Publicly direct attention towards somebody, let the audience react, and then afterward, tell everybody to calm down once the backlash is already happening. By late 2016, Rebornica's relationship with Tumblr had basically collapsed completely. Rebornica used to reveal little bits of lore and character information during live streams as a kind of bonus for people watching live. And eventually, a criticism blog called The Problematic Bones started reposting those stream details publicly. Rebornica noticed, got irritated about it, mocked the blog for doing it, and then announced on August 28th that they were done sharing stream secrets entirely. And honestly, on its own, that part is pretty understandable. However, the weird part came afterward, because on August 29th, Rebornica got into a 2-hour Discord call with one of the blog's moderators, MOVEmily, trying to resolve the situation privately. According to the logs, the conversation mostly went in circles for hours without really solving anything. Eventually, they managed to agree on one specific point involving a character design Rebornica had been accused of copying. And the second that the agreement happened, Rebornica immediately tried using it as leverage to get the entire criticism blog deleted altogether. MOVEmily refused, which apparently apparently shouldn't have been surprising because they had already said before the call even started that the blog itself was staying up. So 2 days later, on August 31st, Rebornica deleted their Tumblr account entirely. A lot of people interpreted the deletion less as "I need a break from social media" and more as an attempt to wipe years of controversy from easy public access. Whether that was the intention or not, that became the perception. And then we get to August 2017. A 13-year-old fan named Doll was watching one of Rebornica's live streams and acting noticeably upset in the chat. One of the moderators asked what was wrong. Doll explained that his best friend was in a coma, and instead of comforting him or redirecting the conversation gently, Rebornica got irritated that serious personal issues were being brought into the stream chat at all, and what happened in those DMs is the part people still bring up years later, and the message just keeps going from there. The overall point Rebornica was making was that the stream existed as an escape space and that bringing heavy, real-life situations into chat could negatively affect everybody else's mood, which in a vacuum is not an unreasonable boundary to have. The problem is the way they delivered it. This was an 18 or 19-year-old creator unloading paragraphs of anger onto a 13-year-old kid whose friend was literally dying, and the tone of the message is what makes it so difficult to defend. Okay, sorry for your loss. You had the audacity. Stop thinking about yourself only. Reading it now, the entire thing feels less like somebody calmly setting boundaries and more like somebody treating a grieving child as personally annoying for bringing emotions into the wrong online space. And somehow the situation gets even stranger afterward because Doll actually apologized, which honestly is the part that sticks with a lot of people emotionally, because you end up with this 13-year-old trying to apologize for upsetting an adult creator while also dealing with the fact that his best friend was in a coma, and Rebornica still kept going. At this point, the pattern underneath all of these situations is becoming impossible not to notice, and the further this story goes, the more that pattern starts affecting younger fans directly. This is where multiple separate allegations involving minors start appearing across several different years. The first case people usually bring up is radio. This happened between April and July of 2017. Rebornica was almost 19 while Radio was 15. According to the screenshots and messages that later surfaced, the two were in an online dual relationship where Rebornica was sending graphic material and drawing NSFW artwork for them directly. And when people confronted Rebornica about this later, their defense was basically, well, technically Radio is above the age of consent where they lived, which immediately raised multiple problems. First, Radio was not above the age of consent in Malaysia, where Rebornica lived. Second, during this exact same period, Rebornica's NSFW Twitter account had an explicit 18+ warning in the bio. You cannot publicly label your account as 18+ while privately arguing that a 15-year-old still counts as acceptable. And third, Radio was 15. For most people, that alone ended the discussion completely. Then there was another interaction from July 2017 involving a 16-year-old fan named Luna. In leaked screenshots, Rebornica expressed surprise at how innocent and unsettling Luna seemed compared to Radio. And that comparison is the part people found genuinely disturbing, because it unintentionally reveals what Rebornica had apparently started viewing as normal behavior from minors around them. If somebody being unstable at 16 feels surprising enough to comment on, that says a lot by itself. And unfortunately, Radio and Luna were not isolated incidents either. In June 2021, another artist named Nick Sprite posted a thread responding to Rebornica's defense video and describing their own experiences interacting with them as a minor. According to Nick Sprite, Rebornica had directly told them, while they were still a child, that they wanted to have sex with a character Nick Sprite had drawn, a child posting OC artwork online. And again, what makes this so uncomfortable is how direct it allegedly was. An adult openly artwork created by a minor while speaking to that minor personally. Nick Sprite also described Rebornica regularly discussing explicit sexual topics inside Discord servers that had large underage audiences. Boundaries just consistently do not exist. Adult conversations with minors become sexual conversations. Public spaces full of teenagers become spaces where NSFW topics are treated casually, and age differences keep getting brushed aside, like they are secondary details instead of the central issue. Then there's another account from somebody known as Fetus Meme. In January 2022, an ex-friend of Rebornica sent information to a criticism blog describing interactions they had with Rebornica when they were 16 and Rebornica was 19. According to them, Rebornica repeatedly their interpretation of a Bendy and the Ink Machine character directly in front of them and frequently talked about wanting to draw NSFW content involving the character while knowing they were underage. There were also claims that Rebornica made suggestive comments toward them personally, and once you get to this point in the timeline, the number of separate people describing variations of the exact same experience starts becoming really difficult to explain away as a coincidence. And then there are the things that do not really fit into one neat category, but still matter, because once you line all of them up together, the overall picture gets harder and harder to ignore. January 25th, 2019. Rebornica posted that they have been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder and borderline personality disorder. Now, before people misunderstand where this section is going, let me make something very clear. Having DID does not make somebody abusive. Having BPD does not make somebody manipulative. Mental illness is not automatically a moral failing, and this video is not going to turn into one of those lazy internet horror stories where somebody's diagnosis gets treated like proof they are evil. That is not the point here. The problem was what happened immediately afterward, because almost instantly, Rebornica started reframing years of documented behavior as the actions of an alter instead of themselves. According to them, the manipulation, the harassment, the guilt tripping, all of it supposedly came from another identity. And whether intentional or not, that completely changes the framing of accountability once people accept it. Because suddenly every criticism has to pass through this extra layer of uncertainty where people start asking, okay, but was it actually them? There were also details in the post that raised a lot of eyebrows from people familiar with these conditions. At one point, Rebornica claimed that their psychopathy had become so severe that it developed into DID and BPD, which is not how those diagnoses work. They also claimed the DID had been detected through a brain scan, even though DID is diagnosed clinically through psychiatric evaluation and interviews, not brain imaging. And then there were stories involving being a child soldier during childhood trauma discussions, which multiple former friends later disputed publicly. And honestly, by this point, people were struggling to separate what was real, what was exaggerated, what was misunderstood, and what might have been actively rewritten after the fact. Because every new explanation seemed to create 3 more questions underneath it. There was also an ex-friend who later claimed Rebornica once asked whether one of their alters could say the N-word, because that alter was black. And then there is the sewer slide baiting and guilt tripping. Rebornica would threaten self-harm, imply sewer slide, talk about relapsing, or frame themselves as being pushed toward death by the people confronting them. You see it in the Fu situation, you see it during the Vincent copyright drama, you see it during friendship fallouts, over and over and over again. And if you trace the timeline forward from there, what you eventually get is not really a redemption arc. And it is not some dramatic triumphant comeback either. It is mostly just disappearance. By around 2019 to 2020, Rebornica had already drifted away from the original FNAF AU that made them famous. They kept cycling through different usernames and identities online, often deleting or abandoning accounts along the way. And then came the 2020 disappearance. According to posts archived by criticism, blogs following the situation, Rebornica posted messages heavily implying sewer slide or hospitalization, and then vanished from both the internet and real life for a period of time. Friends publicly claimed they had no idea where they were, but privately, according to leaked screenshots circulated later online, some of those same friends allegedly did know where they were and were helping maintain the idea that nobody had contact with them. One leaked message described it bluntly. Rebornica was supposedly faking their death so people would finally stop talking about them. And honestly, by this point in the timeline, the exact details almost stopped mattering. Now technically, yes, there was an attempted return to the FNAF AU. Around 2019, Rebornica briefly announced plans to revisit and redesign the old universe, including new versions of Vincent and the other iconic AU characters. The idea was supposedly reclaiming the project from bad memories and rewriting it properly. And for some older fans, that was huge, because whether people liked Rebornica or hated them, their AU genuinely shaped massive parts of early FNAF fandom culture. But the reception was nowhere near universally positive. A lot of people had not forgotten what happened between 2015 and 2018, and almost immediately, the backlash started resurfacing again. And eventually, the reboot just kind of stopped. Since then, Rebornica seems to have mostly disappeared from major public fandom spaces under different identities. And now, most newer FNAF fans have absolutely no idea who they are. But the people who were there remembered, especially the people who got hurt by all of it. And honestly, I think that's the weirdest part about this entire story looking back on it now. Because Rebornica did not disappear just because the fandom forgot them, but because the internet remembered too much. If you followed Philadelphia baseball anywhere between about 2010 and 2016, you probably knew the name Emily Youcis, but nobody called her that. To a stadium full of baseball fans, she was Pistachio Girl, the concessions vendor who sang her sales pitch as she walked the aisles at Phillies games. For a few summers, she was a small beloved member of the city. Then, in December 2016, she was fired, and the drama behind it turned that wholesome image completely inside out. A core Aramark value is treating everyone with integrity and respect always. That includes respecting our associates' right to privacy and dealing with personnel matters confidentially. We can only confirm that the individual asked about is no longer employed after publicly connecting our company to views that contradict our values. It turned out the internet's beloved singing nut vendor was a radical white nationalist, and when asked if it was true, she had this to say.
Like other white people being like, hey, why can't I be proud to be white? Everyone else can. I'm tired of this. I think they're waiting for someone to say it.
Now, on its own, this just seemed like a strange local news story. Wholesome mascot turned out to hold views several people don't agree with, gets fired. The end, and that's exactly how the whole country covered it for about 72 hours. But the ballpark was only half of her life. Years before anyone in Philadelphia knew her political views, Emily was an underground Flash animator on Newgrounds with a devoted cult following of her own.
There's a place you can't escape to mentally. We're always silly news is making for a century. For the purpose of self-preservation, here at Alfred's Playhouse. It's a fantasy world of fun where reality's distorted.
Her most famous cartoon, released nearly a decade before she was fired, was about a traumatized character who invents a dictator alter ego. She drew a story about a mind splitting into a sweet public face and a hidden authoritarian one, years before her real life did the exact same thing. It was wild. But losing the job and getting exposed didn't push Emily out of that world. It pushed her all the way into organized white nationalism. I think we should have a multitude of strategies, from normie-friendly American nationalism to hang-all N-word, K-slur, and F-slur. I wouldn't call stopping food and medical aid to a bunch of AIDS-infested N-word a genocide. I'd call it letting nature run its course. Then a movement marriage, and topped off with years of extreme activism that got her banned from nearly every mainstream platform.
Why is it hateful when white people defend themselves, but it's not hateful when Jews defend themselves? And it's especially funny because the Anti-Defamation League, literally all they do is defame.
That's literally what they do. Yes, exactly.
By 2024, the internet had written her off completely, despite her antics. But Emily wasn't done with her neo-Nazis ways. In fact, the most disturbing moment of her entire career came from the last place people expected. To understand how far she fell, you have to start with how small the country thought her story was. For about 72 hours in December 2016, everyone believed they had the whole thing summed up in a single headline. By her own account, Emily had started paying close attention to politics in late 2015. She backed Donald Trump in the primaries, and by the opening months of 2016, she'd been drawn into what she called the white identity movement. They wanted to find their own culture and identity as white Americans at the expense of everyone else, of course. She told the Inquirer the pull had been building for about 10 months. Youcis told me last night that she was at the conference as an observer, but added that she's been enthralled with the so-called alt-right movement for about 10 months. Remember that number, 10 months. It would matter later in this story because it was one of several details that stopped lining up. But before anyone noticed those inconsistencies, something else had already started drawing attention, and it had nothing to do with politics. In March 2016, an animation panel at the convention MagFest was rolling along normally until Emily, who wasn't one of the scheduled panelists, came up on stage and the panelists let her stay. Then she dragged the whole thing somewhere ugly. She badgered a fellow animator to draw adult content and branded the pop star Keisha an Illuminati puppet.
Kesha's an Illuminati puppet and she has handlers.
Wow, where do you come from?
She has handlers. I know you know about the struggle. She has a dissociative identity disorder.
Then Emily took it a step further. She accused Adult Swim's Mr. Pickles of ripping off her own character and aimed a crude remark at someone that asked a question.
What if you bad drawing
Do
the
you hate your mom?
Maybe.
Because if you do, make a thing of
couple ideas.
get her murdered and raped.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my
All right, that was.
What if like Teva
To be fair, she didn't force her way up there. She had been brought onto the stage by the panelists, but she was the one who turned a friendly animation panel into a spectacle. Here's the strange part though. Barely anyone watched that panel when it actually happened. It only detonated years later, once it got clipped and re-uploaded across TikTok and YouTube, and it landed in front of an audience that had no idea who this woman even was. However, that gap, the old footage hitting brand new eyes, turned out to be the engine of her entire second act. Structurally, though, the panel mattered for one reason. It was the first time the harmless, quirky artist cracked and something aggressive showed through, months before the politics went public. So, When the politics did surface, nobody who'd seen it was surprised. It just looked like the mask was slipping off completely. From there, the signs came faster. That July, during the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, she turned up working a megaphone, heckling protesters and going after Hillary Clinton, with her political views now spilling fully into public view.
Now we just saw you jump on the microphone and say that Hillary raped people. I got gasps from the crowd.
I don't know why. They already said the Bill raped people. Why not Hillary? It's all part of the same operation. Ritual makes the world go round.
So are you a Hillary supporter out here instigating?
Do you think I would be a Hillary supporter if I thought she was a rapist and a murderer and all that shit?
The moment the two lives fused on camera came during the season. In a segment for MLB.com, Emily turned up in a red cap that read, "Make the Phillies great again," a riff on Trump's slogan, and belted out her usual pitch on camera.
There we go! Let me tell you guys, we're going to make the Phillies great again, baby. We're going to make the Phillies great again.
We're the Marlins broadcast, but I hope you do have a good season.
We're going to make the Phillies great again, baby.
The whole firing scandal hinged on all these actions. Emily's sweet ballpark persona and the politics were now a single image, on camera for anyone to see. And the biggest collision was still 2 months out. On November 19th, 2016, the National Policy Institute, a white nationalist think tank run by Richard Spencer and labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, held a conference that became infamous for attendees throwing Nazi salutes at Spencer. Emily showed up, called herself an observer, and stepped outside with a photographer to confront the protesters.
So you need to take your ass back inside the building where you belong. Oh, she's a Nazi! I remember you from last night. Yeah, you motherfucker. Get the f*** out of here.
Is that the kind of attitude?
Yeah, for white nationalists, hell yeah. Oh, I didn't see that.
I just got sprayed.
The blink of an eye, a protester spray painted her hair and a fight broke out almost immediately. Her cameraman got bloodied in the process and the police had to be called to pull it apart. Afterward, Emily painted the protesters as the violent and racist ones. I think they're the racists here, because I've been sprayed in the face, I've been told to f off, they bloodied my cameraman and stole his phone. They are the violent people. And then came the accelerant. The very next day, former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke boosted the clip and had this to say: "In the current year, if you're white and don't wake up hating yourself for it, then you're considered a Nazi." Emily retweeted him. That single share dragged her out of local weird story and into national extremist signal. Within 2 weeks, the complaints reached the one place that could actually end all of it, her employer. Prior to this, most people assumed Emily was a Phillies employee, but this is where everyone got it wrong. She was an at-will vendor for Aramark, the team's concessions contractor. So when the firing came in early December, Aramark confirmed she was gone. A core Aramark value is treating everyone with integrity and respect always. That includes respecting our associates' right to privacy and dealing with personnel matters confidentially. We can only confirm that the individual asked about is no longer employed after publicly connecting our company to views that contradict our values. The pickup was instant. Multiple news outlets and even late-night television host Stephen Colbert reported and spun a late-night bit out of the drama of a beloved nut vendor turning out to be an avowed white nationalist.
Well, fun story. This week, the pistachio girl was fired for being an avowed white nationalist. Then why is she selling pistachios? Cracker Jacks has cracker right in the name. Now, that's the natural fit. That's the fit. Now, obviously, this is upsetting. This is shocking. No one ever expects a beloved nut vendor.
But that coverage skipped a lot. There was no single headline that mentioned her cartoons, and that's stranger than it sounds. The single most revealing thing about Emily Youcis, a decade of animation that read, in hindsight, like a blueprint for exactly where she ended up, was completely invisible to the mainstream story. Her reaction, on the other hand, set the template for everything that followed. The usual playbook after scandal is apologize, lie low, and make a quiet comeback. Emily ran it backwards. She floated around the idea of pursuing a First Amendment lawsuit, but it went nowhere.
Explain in more detail. I mean, that wouldn't hold up in a court of law. You have to prove it.
Yeah, give me a proof. I mean, I've said plenty of things, but I've never advocated for violence, and I've never used any sort of racial slurs or anything like that. Yeah, some part of me just pictures myself taking it all the way, all the way to the court, and getting filmed and everything, and just walking in and hiling while I enter the courtroom. I mean, I have nothing left to lose now. That's the beautiful thing is.
She also doubled down on X. Exactly. What's more important, selling nuts for a couple more years or saving the white race from extinction? Pointing out that Jews control the media and started communism isn't anti-Semitism, it's a fact. All this, there was no apology from Emily anywhere on record. The crowd, on the other hand, had 3 different reactions. The mainstream treated it as a grim novelty. The wholesome mascot who turned out to be a Nazi. Phillies fans took it as betrayal. I don't know why, but this just makes my heart ache. She seemed so lovely. It's a damn shame. But inside the circles she was entering, things were being interpreted a little differently. Emily was the victim. It's good to see white nationalism is really taking off. It's the idea of saving Western civilization. It's not a bad idea. What a brave woman. I wouldn't want to be in the street with these poop-flinging if-word saying man apes. While the rest of the internet was still reeling from her betrayal, the people she was about to surround herself with saw someone worth rallying behind. Losing that job didn't push her out of the movement. It pulled her deeper in. Remember that 10-month timeline I said is going to matter later? Well, let's get to it now. Emily Youcis told news outlets that the pull had been building up before November 2016. She said she initially followed figures from the JW and alt-light scene, including Lauren Southern and Milo Yiannopoulos. From there, she moved on to Red Ice, then to communities built around a neo-Nazi podcast and its Discord servers, before ending up on openly neo-Nazi forums. Looking back, she described each step as taking her closer to what she called the movement's center.
Time for that, but
Yeah,
at the
it's ridiculous.
at the beginning it was fun though. So as time went on, I was like really stuck in the alt-light phase, and I was like,
Milo?
I was like, yep, the Milo and the I don't know, Breitbart, Christina Sommers, and
Rebel,
yeah, Rebel Media, and like Lauren Southern, and I was like, well, like e-celebs, this is I always wanted to get to the epicenter of the alt-right, and for a little bit I thought that was it, but something didn't seem right. It didn't seem like it was really the center, but for a while I was still stuck there.
And that's where her story didn't align. Emily often claimed she'd always held these beliefs and that 2016 simply gave her permission to express them. But she also described moving through one community after another until she reached what she called the movement's center. Those 2 explanations can't both be true. Her own account contradicted itself. In her interview with Red Ice, she walked through her radicalization step by step, describing it as a personal awakening rather than something to regret. From 2016 to 2020, she became a fixture on that circuit. On the Gavin McInnes show, she pushed white racial preservation, and on another appearance, she agreed that Jewish people had got the ball rolling on political correctness. The podcasts she went on to co-host openly praised the Third Reich and pushed anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
By the end of 2016, I was saying the 14 words, and I believed that Hitler was not so bad.
There were a few side stories along the way of Emily's self-realization. Emily said she spent some time living in South Korea to escape harassment, although that claim has never been verified. She also clashed with others in the far-right scene, an early sign of the infighting that would become common within the movement. But those conflicts were minor compared with the relationship that came next. Around 2017 to 2018, Emily became associated with Patrick Little, a Marine veteran and IT guy turned openly neo-Nazi activist who mounted a 2018 run for California's Republican Senate nomination on an openly anti-Semitic platform. And he wasn't a nobody. He briefly polled around 18% in one survey, polled roughly 90,000 votes, and got thrown out of the state Republican convention.
They just had me expelled from the building.
August 2018, the watchdog Right Wing Watch reported that Emily was with Little in Washington during his anti-Semitic Name the Jew tour. Then her personal life and the movement fully merged. Emily Youcis married Warren Balaw, a white nationalist who helped found the National Justice Party in August 2020. According to Searchlight, his father was a longtime white power activist, and Warren was among those who attended the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017. But the movement she married into wasn't exactly the empire it claimed to be. The National Justice Party presented itself as a serious white civil rights organization. But according to Searchlight, it had largely fallen apart by late 2023 because of financial problems and constant infighting. Even Warren Balaw's finances became a target of ridicule from people on the same side of the political spectrum. So much for the image of a disciplined master race. For a few years, the couple's most consistent output was a modern politics show launched around 2021 on fringe platforms like Odyssey.
Is it hateful when white people defend themselves, but it's not hateful when Jews defend themselves? And it's especially funny because the Anti-Defamation League, literally all they do is defame.
That's
their
literally what they do. Yes, exactly. So
was flatly propagandistic, glorifying history's worst regimes, pushing anti-Semitic and election fraud conspiracy theories. Throughout all this, however, she never stopped creating, even as her audience grew smaller. Another defining incident for her this period was deplatforming. Literally, no one likes Emily Youcis, hence why she's banned from almost every conceivable social media platform. Case in point, the 2016 MagFest animation panel that she nearly single-handedly ruined. One mainstream platform after another removed her accounts for violating their rules. Each ban reduced her reach and pushed her further onto fringe platforms such as Telegram, BitChute, and Odyssey, sites known for attracting creators removed from mainstream social media because of their lighter moderation. But everything you just learned, the podcast, the movement marriage, was simply just a payoff. The trail leading there began years earlier, with a cartoon almost nobody remembers anymore. In 2006, 16-year-old Emily Youcis uploaded a short cartoon to Newgrounds. In it, a dog dodges being neutered, and then seconds later throws itself through a window to its death. It had barely any views, but that clip about a character who picks his own ending over the thing coming for him is the seed of everything. And to understand why, you have to meet the person who drew it years before Philadelphia handed her a nickname. In a Newgrounds comment from 2013 that got screenshotted and passed around for years, Emily revealed that she'd been abused as a child. Oh, one more, just one more. Give me another, please sir. Fill up my comment boxes with your love. Yes, it is true I did not have a healthy, normal childhood. I was SA among other things. Now, my family is somewhat in shambles, but I suppose you would deem that all my fault, and that I probably deserve it even because I made a dog having a drink and a W word in my cartoons. Go on, say it. Say I deserve to be SA at night while my mom was in the hospital. Say it, you bad, bad little boy. Now, you do realize that just because you went to Disney World does not mean you had a good childhood. Am I right? In fact, plenty of children a year get sodomized by those rat characters, just like it will happen to you and your most likely wretched cuntlap of an obese wife. And yet I can still feel joy and love and pleasure and the highest of highs. Animating is probably the closest I've come to heaven in my life, and that's what I get out of it. The most you probably get out of your wife every night is a few whalish moments before her dried poop repels your chafed, limp DK once again, and you go to sleep unsatisfied and angry for having to lie beside that lard-filed ass, unsatisfied and angry just like your reviews. Yes, I do find a great kick out of the people finding me offensive. It does give me the chuckles. Just like I've gotten a kick out of your wonderful walls of text. Dear sir, oh please, please just give me one more, just one more wall. Please come on, tell me again how shitty I am. Yes, I love it. At large, Emily made sure to make it the lens for her entire catalog. She wanted every dark cartoon she drew read as a wound. And it stuck, but her fans didn't call it yet. Over the next decade, across dozens of animations, that dog from 2006, a character named Alfred, grew from a crude MS paint gag into the center of a strange, elaborate mythology. The hinge was a 2007 short called Rise of Alfred. Newly made manager of a knockoff fast food joint, Alfred gets buried under flashbacks of a neglected childhood and decides the answer is to rule as a dictator. Safe to say, the cartoon set the psychology for everything after it. It showed a craving for love so raw that the smallest scrap of power curdled into tyranny. All of it running through an authoritarian second self she named Dictator Pickles. If that character name rings a bell, it should. It's the same Dictator Pickles she'd melt down about years later on that MagFest stage, accusing a cartoon of stealing him. But the cartoon that made her a cult name came at the end of that same year. The 3-part Alfred's Playhouse is still her most watched, most picked apart work. Set off by a memory of his abuse, Alfred spirals into a warped parody of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And by the end, Dictator Pickles takes him hostage, forces the buried memories back up, and takes control of his body, leaving the real Alfred to drift off into a permanent, chosen delusion. He picks a comforting fantasy over a reality he can't carry.
There's a place you can't escape to mentally. We're always silly news is making for a century. For the purpose of self-preservation, here at Alfred's Playhouse. It's a fantasy world of fun where reality's distorted. Where a man-child goes to forget he was unsuccessfully aborted. It's kind of like your perception is changed like magic, so you can flee when the real.
The whole thing was filled with references to 20th century dictators. At first, it seemed like childish shock humor to some people and deeper symbolism to others, but it became much stranger once people saw where Emily eventually ended up. Let's analyze it for a second. The story was about someone so hurt that they created a harsh, authoritarian version of themselves to take over, while their kinder self faded into the background. Emily wrote that in 2007. Now, how people, fans, and critics included, Read The Playhouse has always been split two ways. Some admired it as unsettling outsider art. For the people that think this is disturbing or weird, this is a perfect example of art that comforts the disturbed and disturbs the comforted. Many sat somewhere in the middle, praising the animation while finding the subject matter disturbing. Honestly, I respect this type of abstract art and how Emily is expressing her thoughts and emotions through animation. But it's so sad that she's such an awful person nowadays. The work only got darker from there. Between 2013 and 2016, she pieced together her most ambitious project, the Alfred Alpha movie. Instead of telling one straightforward story, she built it from scattered, non-linear scenes released over several years before compiling them into a single film. In one, Alfred road trips with a black, red-eyed dog named Labby, who abandons him in what she called the land of the exiled dead, where a drunken talking melon feeds him self-destructive advice.
Surprise will be there. Don't peek. Cover your eyes. Don't peek, Alfred.
Okay, Labby.
See you in hell, bitch.
Yay, Labby, a surprise. Can I open my eyes now, Labby? Can I? Can I peek?
Another part of the film contained some of the most graphic material she ever made. Here, Alfred was nearly talked into suicide by hallucination of Labby before falling into a necrophilic fever dream and waking up in a graveyard, where Dictator Pickles had taken over again. It closes with the ascent of Alfred in 2016, her final Alfred animation, where he uploads himself into the internet and destroys both the playhouse and himself. The reading she loosely endorsed is that Labby personifies Alfred's sexual trauma, and that the whole movie might be one extended dissociative break. The content escalated into graphic and necrophilic imagery that people felt went out of control. I'm just surprised that she's still alive. I, in full honesty, genuinely thought she had killed herself because the shit she animates and thinks about is so disturbing that I'm shocked she hasn't yet. The animation is insanely good, although the content/script is like, mercy, what the hell is this? Even sympathetic viewers admitted the film was a mess with no way in unless you've memorized a decade of prior lore. It's really hard to understand. It's not just a psychedelic film. Even so, one thing was impossible to deny. Over the next decade, her animation improved dramatically. The movement became smoother, the lighting and shading more advanced, and even critics acknowledged how much her technical skill had grown. At the same time, the subject matter became darker, and political ideas began appearing more openly in her work. Emily wasn't ignored because she lacked talent. She had real ability and was given opportunities, and those opportunities didn't come out of nowhere. As her work improved, she became connected to other animators working in the same corner of the internet. One of the most influential was Jimmy Screamer Claus, real name James Creamer, the creator of the 2012 adult horror film Where the Dead Go to Die. Emily voiced an Alfred cameo in the film, and the two dated around 2012 to 2013. His red-eyed dog, Labby, later crossed over into the Alfred Alpha movie, where Emily reimagined the character as part of Alfred's trauma. According to her, the relationship ended over the phone. She eventually turned that breakup into part of Alfred's story. A man I thought loved me for over a year just dumped me over the phone. He animates 3D cartoons and has a fucked up dog character named Labby, as you see here. So this is very much based on a true story. That feeling when the only other person on the internet who has as much as a fucked up perverse dog character as you dumps you over the phone. Emily's work wasn't just limited to animation. Around 2010, she formed the punk band Emily Pukis and the Vagrants with fellow art students in Philadelphia. The group started as a Gigi Allen cover band before writing original songs, many of which she later used in her animations as music videos. She also made green screen comedy videos under the name Emily Show and appeared regularly on the now defunct Scrapple TV, including a segment called Smut Cave.
We're all struggling. We're all weak little bastards. I want to go into the world, collect information from homeless people and the various shit spots. I'd wheel them together in a gang so I would not be one little white girl, but I have a big pack.
Her biggest opportunity, however, came through Newgrounds. Emily said she showed her work to Trauma co-founder Lloyd Kaufman at a meetup, and he became interested in collaborating with her. According to Emily, he later gave her some trauma-related work around 2015. So two very different lives were unfolding at the same time. By day, she entertained families at a baseball stadium. In her own time, she made disturbing animations about death, trauma, and authoritarianism. For almost a decade, those worlds never collided. That instinct to take private pain and turn it into a cartoon was the disturbed voice underneath everything she made. And by the mid-2020s, the internet assumed that voice had gone quiet for good. Then somewhere, somehow, a machine switched on, paving the way for an unexpected comeback. On October 7th, 2025, from an account called AlfredAlfer77, Emily posted the first episode of a series called The Will Stancil Show. It was an AI animated satire she built largely with OpenAI's Sora, feeding hand-drawn stills into the model and cutting it together in post. And it aimed at a real person, Will Stancil, a progressive writer and lawyer based in Minneapolis, known online for waging city planning fights at high volume and posting almost constantly.
Ah, nothing like getting some brewskis with a good friend after a long day fighting fascists on X.com.
It do be like that, Mr. Stancil.
The show cast Stancil as a bumbling do-gooder paired with a stereotyped black sidekick whose deadpan catchphrase turned into a meme that people kept firing back at the real Stancil for weeks. It do be like that, Mr. Stancil. I have no mouth and I must scream. Will Stancil in the belly of Grok. For someone who was reportedly cancelled, you couldn't deny the numbers were huge from the show. Within months, episode 1 pulled around 1.9 million views. And the target fed the fire himself when he quote tweeted it more than once. The prominent neo-Nazi who is sexually obsessed with me has created a cartoon miniseries about me, and now the entire worldwide neo-Nazi movement and seemingly the whole of Twitter is obsessed with tweeting the catchphrase at me, so much so it Google autocompletes. Every tweet of mine instantly garners hundreds or even thousands of replies with this catchphrase. Again, this woman is an explicit white supremacist who believes Jews and black people should be exterminated. This is who runs Twitter now, with Elon Musk's express approval. The more the real Stancil pushed back, even to object, even to mock it, the harder the algorithm pushed the cartoon attacking him. His own reach became fuel for the fire targeting him. For Emily, on the other hand, after a decade of making work that stayed locked inside niche communities, she'd finally made something that got out. Pop open the champagne for this one. Congrats, way ahead of you. The series continued. One episode, A Grokwork Orange, referenced A Clockwork Orange, while another, released around February. The AI Who Loved Me was inspired by a viral incident involving Grok. At that point, it was clear this wasn't a one-off project. The reception, it was nothing to write home about. On one side, a cluster of tech and comedy voices focused on how the show was made. They argued it proved that one person, using AI tools, could successfully produce a serialized animated series. A bold new frontier in media. The Will Stancil Show paves the way for a new kind of synthetic origin art, rather than the cheap, obnoxious, AI-generated slop flooding YouTube. This is transformative art that brilliantly merges the creator's artistic vision, AI technology, and the absurdity of real life. On the other hand, people argued that the use of AI had taken away from human artists and creators who put in the work. If we start allowing AI to create mainstream media, thousands of jobs will become obsolete below the executive level. From storyboard artists to writers, every single person who works to create media will be out of a job. It is that simple to understand. AI has no place in film. It's harmful to the industry and to the environment. It's straight slop. It takes no skill or talent to create works that are essentially stitched together pieces of stolen work. It's shameful, and any respectable filmmaker would denounce its use. But there was one thing almost everyone agreed on. This wasn't the kind of AI content you make by typing a prompt and waiting. Even many of her critics accepted that the work involved far more than one-click generation. It just kind of clicked for me that you're probably drawing a lot of art for the show and feeding it into the AI to animate, so it has a point of reference. You're the breaker of Korean animator slave chains. She admitted that she drew the images herself, fed them into Sora, and then edited the results by hand. Yes, everything is animated using my own original character drawings. And here's the part that should unsettle you most. Emily Youcis' comeback videos read the same authorial voice from 2006. The fixations, provocations, and the instinct to turn a grievance into a cartoon was back and laundered through a machine that reached millions yet again. The comeback didn't happen because she changed. It happened because the platform's rules changed. When moderation loosened after Twitter's ownership shift, the door she'd been locked out of for years swung right back open, allowing Emily to thrive again. MOVEmily is an alternate reality game, an ARG created by a YouTuber named Systix. If you don't know what an ARG is, the short version is this. It's a piece of interactive fiction that's designed to bleed into reality. Not a video game with a clear menu and a start button. Something more like a puzzle that's been scattered across multiple real platforms like YouTube, Roblox, TikTok, and Discord, with no instruction manual and no guarantee that the people encountering it will even know it's fiction at all. But MOVEmily stood out from other alternate reality games. At first, everyone was excited to play the new game, but as more clues popped up, some people started suspecting that this may not be a game at all and may instead be a cry for help from a stranded underage girl who was kidnapped by an older guy she met online. The tension and anxiety kept building up as people reached out in the comment sections, offering to help. Emily, this is a Q&A, so I have questions. Are you okay? Do you need help? Tell the truth about your lore. I think she got kidnapped, or so I think. Hey, Emily, I have some questions for the Q&A. Why did you start making content? Did you and Josh end up dating? Will you ever do a face reveals, IRL content? Where are you currently attending school? And then came the big plot twist, just when everyone thought they had MOVEmily figured out. Something no one else predicted was revealed. MOVEmily was linked to a Roblox game with a dark history that was allegedly created by a predator and kidnapper after abusing and killing his victim.
I am not okay. I may have just found where he buried her. Is this real? This Roblox game was allegedly created by someone's stalker. It's called Sarah's House Tycoon, and the goal of the game is to earn enough money to build a girl named Sarah's house. However, once you do, you start noticing weird things, like a stranger hiding under the car, or a creepy shed in the backyard.
I'll get into everything in this video, starting from her first upload. So sit back and grab your popcorn because you don't want to miss any detail. The first video on the MOVEmily channel is called My First Video. Emily introduces herself. She explains that she's been wanting to start a channel for a while. She shows off her animated avatar. She sounds eager and a little nervous the way every creator sounds in that first upload.
There's a lot going on outside. Hi YouTube, my name is MOVEmily. I decided to start making videos as a way to document my life, mainly because a lot has happened that I thought would make great videos that you will definitely want to stick around for. Some facts about me in real life. I am an American artist from the East Coast who loves to draw. I'm 5'4" and currently attend school. And my real name also happens to be Emily. So if you're interested in hearing real stories, go ahead and subscribe for future videos.
On the surface, there is nothing here, but when viewers took a closer look, they discovered something odd. In most storytime channels, the creator keeps their personal details vague. You feel their general vibe, maybe learn about their city if they're comfortable, and that's about it. Emily, on the other hand, did the opposite. She mentions her actual height, 5'4". She gives her real name, she says where she lives, and she even talks about going to school. It's the kind of detail that a real teenager might overshare without thinking about it. Within the narrative of the ARG, this video was a record, a deliberate record of Emily's physical appearance and personal details in the event that she disappeared and someone needed to identify her. And then it clicked. She wasn't introducing herself to get subscribers. She was building a file on herself because she already knew something bad was coming. Let's also talk about the sign-off. The video ends with the description. This is my first animated video, but my next upload will be really important. Thank you for reading, not watching. The distinction is small enough that you'd scroll past it on a first watch, but it becomes significant fast. If you can't speak, if your ability to produce verbal language has been taken from you, then the written word is the only thing you have left. The recurring phrase, thank you for reading, threaded through the entire channel wasn't a quirky sign-off. It was Emily communicating the method she had been reduced to. She was asking people to read her, not just watch her. People who watched the video started making observations with comments like, the way she puts emphasis on her height, where she's from, and on her real name makes it look like she's missing. It's like she's describing herself so you can spot her somewhere if needed. Another person said, this is possibly the story of an adult girl who was kidnapped by someone she met online. Despite the concerns, not much could be done without additional context. All anyone could do was make assumptions until the second video dropped, and it indeed provided the missing link. The title of that video was How I Met My Roblox Friend in Real Life. Emily tells the story of meeting someone online. She explains that she had been playing a Roblox obstacle course game, a obby in Roblox terminology, and that she had connected with another player through a Discord server attached to the game. That player was someone she called Josh. The Josh guy sent her a DM. They started talking, days went by, they became friends, and at some point, Josh found Emily's Instagram. Not because she gave it to him, but because he went looking for it himself.
I got a DM from someone we'll call Josh. Josh said I was pretty good at the game, and after we played a few matches, I decided to friend him online. A few days go by, and I notice a notification on Instagram from someone trying to follow my account. I opened the DM, and it was the same person I met on Discord. It was Josh.
This is the first moment where the ARG's design becomes visible if you know what you're looking at. Emily frames the Instagram thing almost casually. She acknowledges that Josh found it on his own, but she doesn't use the word stalking. She doesn't treat it as a violation even though it clearly was.
I asked him how he found my account, and he said it was because both my Discord name and Instagram user were the same. We laughed, and he started bringing up questions about the photos on my profile. Do you really live in South Carolina? I'm pretty close, he said. Ha 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 ha.
Yes, I live in South Carolina.
After that, Josh messaged me every day. Eventually, we decided to meet up in person. Josh lived about 4 hours and 45 minutes away, but he was determined to make the drive. At first I was nervous, but Josh reassured me that everything would be okay.
And the video ends with her saying directly to the camera and saying, "I hope this showed you there's nothing to worry about when meeting an online friend," followed by, "Thank you for reading." That line, "nothing to worry about," is doing double duty. On the surface level of the animated story time, it's a creator signing off warmly. On the level of the ARG narrative, it's a girl who has been manipulated into normalizing the behavior of a predator, delivering that normalized version of events to an audience who might take it at face value. The horror of it is that Emily wasn't lying. She genuinely believed it at the time. That's exactly how grooming works.
But something changed when we met up. Josh didn't act the same. He didn't want to meet any of my friends, but instead asked if I could get into his car. We drove. After about 30 minutes, we stopped at a lake. Josh got out telling me he had something for me at the back of the car. To my surprise, Josh got me an anniversary card. "What is this?" I asked. "If we went out, this could be our anniversary. Ha 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 ha."
The thing is, the version of events in the narration wasn't the only version in the video. There was a hidden layer, the closed captions were turned on in the video, and they reflected the story Emily was telling out loud, but the text that appeared on screen as part of the animation itself told a slightly different version. Those two tracks didn't fully line up, and of course, people noticed. This is basically an example / depiction of online and manipulation. By the way, because Josh is implied to be way older than Emily, because why would he not like to meet Emily's other friends? Which also states Josh is a catfishing adult who first killed his first victim, who was probably either a young girl or just a kid, Sarah. Then Emily, who is stated to be a kid, gets it worse. She gets lobotomized with a literal drill, while Sarah gets shot with a shotgun and decapitated and is implied to be thrown away at a landfill. Quite disturbingly interesting. The on-screen text was stripping details out of the narration. Where the spoken story mentioned Instagram specifically, the text version said, "Someone trying to follow me." She was cutting the platform reference, making it vague, making it sound less like a specific act and more like general anxiety. These aren't the omissions of a careless writer. They were designed to read as the omissions of someone who was choosing their words carefully. Someone who was trying to communicate without being caught communicating. Every on-screen text had a hidden message, and then there were the visuals. After Josh drives to South Carolina to meet Emily in person, which the video frames as a positive thing, a fun real-life meetup, the footage switches from animation to real Google Earth imagery. It was a lake and a GPS route. The lake is named on screen Lake Murray. The route shows a starting point somewhere in North Carolina, specifically a city whose name is just barely cropped off the edge of the frame. The rest of the video continues in animation, but the Google Earth footage has landed in the middle of it like a rock through a window. Josh's animated avatar was also strange looking. If you adjust the video exposure upward, a face becomes visible on the character. Not the blocky, cartoonish face of a Roblox avatar, but something else. Something set slightly behind the image. The kind of visual trick that rewards the person who was already suspicious enough to go looking. It was an ARG engine. The video introduced the threat, wrapped it in the language of an innocent story time, and embedded the actual story in the parts you had to actively search for. And it only got worse with the third video. My Funniest Dream Story, animated. The title promises exactly the kind of content the first two videos had been building, toward which was a light, casual, animated story time about something that happened in a dream. You click on it expecting more of the same format. What you get instead is Emily's animated face slowly draining of color while a single phrase loops in the audio track.
Please pretend this is a real video. 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 Please pretend this is a real video.
That's it. There's no story time, there's no dream, there's no attempt to maintain the fiction that this is a normal channel doing normal things. The audio loops for the entire runtime, and then, about halfway through, the video cuts to MRI brain scans. Medical images of a human brain displayed plainly without narration. After the scans, text appears explaining what aphasia is, a condition affecting the brain's ability to process and produce language, typically resulting from injury or neurological trauma. It can leave someone fully conscious and aware but unable to speak in coherent sentences or unable to speak at all. That's the moment the second video's story snapped into focus for most viewers. The narration versus on-screen text split. She hadn't been telling the story oddly because she is a careless writer. She'd been telling it oddly because she no longer had full control over her language. The aphasia explanation wasn't a horror element dropped in for atmosphere. It was a medical explanation for a storytelling behavior that had been present since the second video. Viewers started connecting the dots. Does anyone think that Emily could have gotten a lobotomy, considering in her first video, at the last frame, her eyes disappear and then there's also a lot of stuff going on with her eyes? A lobotomy is usually done under the eyelids. Also, because of the fact that brain scans are in this video a lot. One of the pictures was about aphasia. Aphasia is a disorder caused by brain damage and it makes it hard to speak, understand, read, and even write. Dude, holy shit. I'm guessing Emily has brain damage from something Josh did. I mean, Josh uses a drill to do a lobotomy. Almost everyone who commented was thinking the same thing. Josh had hurt Emily, and this was the only way she could reach out for possible help. The thumbnails were the other piece. On their own, the first 3 thumbnails on the MOVEmily channel looked like standard animated storytime art. Emily's avatar at different angles, different expressions, and a color palette that matched the tone of each video. But placed side by side in sequence, the thumbnails formed a sentence. Not through any code or hidden cipher, just through the visual elements Emily had arranged across the 3 images: please watch, I need help, and I can't talk. Let's pause for a second and pay closer attention. YouTube thumbnails are the first thing a viewer sees when browsing a channel. They're the most public-facing element of any video. They show up in search results, in recommendations, and in other people's watch history. But nobody looks at multiple thumbnails simultaneously. You see one at a time. To encode a sentence across 3 thumbnails is to hide it in the most visible place possible, because the only way to read it is to step back far enough to see all 3 at once. While most viewers stuck to the kidnapping angle, a few asked the logical questions. A kidnapping seems like it makes the most sense, but the only issue I have with it is why the kidnapped person is being allowed to make YouTube videos. Assuming that the videos aren't watched by the kidnapper as well, the only reason why I can think of why these videos are being allowed to be posted is because Emily is, I'm guessing, lobotomized due to the drill noise heard in the video, and the kidnapper bet on that these videos will just be passed off as random nonsense. Was it a flaw in the storyline? I mean, who kidnaps a girl and then allows her to access YouTube and post videos without at least checking to see what she was posting? Or maybe the kidnapper had no idea Emily had access to a phone or computer? Either way, the plot thickened and everyone was curious to find out what Emily would say next, and then came the 4th video. The Time I Almost Died. Animated story. The title sounds like it should be the setup for a close call, like a car crash maybe, or a scary medical situation, the kind of thing that becomes a relatable storytime topic. But the video opens with audio repeating in the background. Stop scrolling, just those 2 words looping. Then real footage of a lake appears on screen. Not animation, actual footage. The lake looks like Lake Murray.
Stop scrolling. Stop scrolling. Stop scrolling. Stop scrolling. Stop scrolling. Stop.
Was she trying to tell her audience that the animated lake from the previous video was real? Curiosity piqued. After the lake, Emily's animated avatar comes back into frame, and in the background you can hear something that takes a second to identify. A drill. The drill runs for a few seconds. A woman screams. Then Emily's animated eyes go completely white, pale, blank, and drained, and the video cuts to black. It stays black for the rest of the runtime. A few minutes of nothing. The thumbnail for this video showed Emily's avatar alongside images of a human brain, with text reading "Call Someone" is placed prominently across the frame. The drill sound in combination with the 3rd video's MRI imagery and aphasia explanation created a sequence that was impossible to misread. Viewers immediately say it is a lobotomy. Guys, I think Josh brain damaged Emily so she won't call for help or run away, and I think the video is titled "The Time I Almost Died." Emily almost died from Josh brain damaging Emily. These are just theories that I think are true and some evidence I have found. And Emily is using the thumbnails to call for help as well. Please watch, I can't talk, call someone, I need help. Another viewer said, she has no mouth in this thumbnail, another possible link to aphasia mentioned in the last video. The drilling noises lead me to believe it's the result of a makeshift lobotomy by Josh to keep Emily quiet. She had no eyes at the end of the first one, which is probably also related to the lobotomy. Went a little too far with it. For the record, a lobotomy is a surgical procedure, historically performed with drills and surgical tools, that causes damage to the brain's frontal lobe and often results in lasting personality changes, cognitive impairment, and crucially, language and communication disorders. The ARG wasn't spelling this out with a title card. It was assembling the evidence across multiple videos and letting the viewer arrive at the conclusion independently. Also, making the actual lake visible showed that Josh and Emily were in the same environment, if not the exact same place. The place he drove from, the road he took, and the water he passed were all the same frame. And within the ARG's logic, that mattered, because the final destination wasn't supposed to be a meetup at her house. It was supposed to be somewhere near water. Emily's fate within the narrative remained ambiguous to the very end. The channel didn't explain what happened to her or Josh. It ended with the 5th video, which was just Emily begging for more subscribers. Shortly after that video was posted, Systix took away the fun and the guessing game by revealing himself as the creator of MOVEmily. This revelation led to unexpected backlash. Some people felt Systix ruined the immersion lore of the series by revealing his identity. Comments started pouring in. I feel so betrayed. Why Systix? Why would you tell them an ARG was an ARG? The concept of keeping the alternate reality game people on edge because people thought it was real was the charm of it. The unspoken rule about ARGs, you've broken my heart, Systix. I can't believe this. I'm never recovering. Top 10 saddest anime betrayals. For those wondering why people are saying Systix made this, Systix has a history on his channel of making fake video essays on ARGs he's created. And now that he made this video, it's basically revealing that he made it. Systix made this. The worst April Fools ever and the biggest betrayal I've faced. It wasn't all bad. Some people who weren't familiar with ARGs and thought the story was real were relieved to find out it was just a game and there was no actual kidnapping going on in plain sight. I thought this was real at first, but I'm glad it is an ARG. Yeah, it's pretty cool though. Same. I only realized when he mentioned the Roblox game, because the game was fake. After Systix revealed himself, it didn't take long for people to find out that MOVEmily was, in fact, a sequel to Sarah's House Tycoon, one of the darkest plots on Roblox, which may be linked to a real-life kidnapping and murder situation.
Imagine you're a girl named Sarah, a normal teen. You got your parents, your friends, and your daily routine. Everything feels ordinary, except for one thing. Someone is watching you, a stranger. You don't know who he is. A classmate, a family friend, you don't know. And you're terrified. And then it happens. Your life is stolen from you, and that stalker gets you. And the only way your story is remembered is through a Roblox Tycoon, a game where people uncover your truth by playing a silly game, and through this they find out what happened to you and your body.
Sarah's House Tycoon was the project that established the universe, the antagonist, and the storytelling method that Systix would later apply to Emily's channel. And on the surface, Sarah's house looked like nothing. It looked like a simple Roblox Tycoon game from 2014 with blocky graphics and simple building mechanics, the kind of low-stakes digital time killer that filled the platform in that era. The rules when you spawned in were explicit. Take the game seriously, don't share what you see, and specifically, do not type the word Sarah. Players who followed the rules built a house. Players who broke them found out why the rules existed.
And if you type Sarah in the chat, it teleports you to this room with this man holding a weapon, a date written on the walls, and a photo pops up of a woman believed to be Sarah.
The game was set in a neighborhood. You claimed a plot and started building a tycoon version of Sarah's house with walls, furniture, a driveway, and a car. And then you noticed the figure under the car. A Roblox avatar representing the stalker was hiding under Sarah's car in the driveway. Visible from certain angles and visible in first person if you look closely, but easy to miss if you were just playing the game normally. That was the first sign that something else was happening in this game. The building mechanic existed to give you a reason to be present in the space. The space was the point. Behind the school building that was part of the neighborhood layout, there was a dumpster. Locked. If you got close to it, you could hear sounds coming from inside, banging, and something that sounded like screaming.
How do I open the locks? What the hello? Was that screaming?
The key to unlock it was hidden elsewhere in the game, in a shed that you had to unlock by spending enough of the in-game currency to afford it. The shed was the most expensive item in the game, for good reason. Inside the shed, Behind a button hidden in a wall, a teleport sends you to a room covered in photographs. Photos of Sarah, photos of the stalker's avatar positioned in real-world seeming locations around the house and property. And in the audio of that room, a spectrogram, a frequency visualization of sound, spelled out an image of a shed and the word North Carolina.
Is this supposed to be Sarah? Is there a secret door out here too? Wait, how do we get to the key? Because look, it's locked. What is this? No trespassing. Is that the shed? Yo, that's so creepy. June 2nd, June 2nd, June 2nd.
When you had the key and you went back to the dumpster, you unlocked it. The dumpster disappeared, revealing Sarah's decapitated head. The game that had looked like a builder, that had felt like a time waster, had been carrying a murder case the entire time. Era, a teenage girl from New Bern, North Carolina, had been shot, decapitated, disposed of at a landfill. Her head was in the dumpster, her body at an address that appeared on screen as the player's perspective floated upward and the server shut down. The final text that appeared read, "By the time you're reading this, it'll be too late." The thing is, not everyone believed it was just a random game. To this day, there are multiple theories that the person who made the game was indeed a stalker and a murderer who used the game to share the truth about what he did to a young lady. Now, for the MOVEmily connection you've been waiting for. In a members-only, behind-the-scenes video, Systix hinted that he was either involved in the development of Sarah's house or built on the psychological thriller of the game for MOVEmily. Viewers started adding the pieces together and came to the conclusion that Sarah was Josh's first victim, and Emily is the second. I have a crazy theory. The Charlie Brown and Sarah's house, and these are Systix, ARGs. And I'm going to say they all take place in the same universe. And I'm saying that the man who kidnapped Emily is the same person who made the #tycoon account and the person who dressed up as Charlie Brown. That means the man is doing, sexual harassment. Creepy to think about. Another person said, "I'm probably overthinking things, but if the same person who made the game about Emily made Sarah's House Tycoon, are they related in any way? Could Josh be the same dude as the dude from Sarah's House Tycoon? Sorry if this doesn't make much sense." And as I looked closer, I started seeing the links. The classroom in the game had missing seats, implying the stalker and Sarah had been classmates. The date June 2nd appeared throughout the game repeatedly on wallpaper, objects, and environmental details, marking what had presumably been the day of the murder. The tycoon mechanic of building Sarah's house twisted that simple task into something sinister. Simply put, players were constructing the home of someone the game already knew was dead. The connection between Sarah's house tycoon and MOVEmily came through the #tycoon Roblox account, the developer whose fingerprints were on both projects. In Sarah's house, the predator was established as a classmate from New Bern. In MOVEmily, the same antagonist Josh had moved to a new platform, found a new victim through Discord and Roblox, and committed violence of a different but parallel kind. Sarah had been killed. Emily had been silenced. Both had been documented in fragments across games that looked like something else. The shared universe wasn't just a creative choice, it was the mechanism by which the horror scaled. One victim is a tragedy, two victims is a pattern. And patterns, in the logic of true crime and ARG culture alike, demand closer investigation. There's also another angle I picked up on, and it has to do with safety. Roblox in 2020 and beyond wasn't just a game platform. It was one of the primary social environments for children, teenagers, and young adults. A space where millions of young users interacted with strangers every day through games, chat, and Discord servers attached to those games. The platform has been criticized over its moderation practices and the ease with which predatory behavior could go undetected inside these outwardly child-friendly game environments.
If your kids play Roblox, you need to watch this. I'm not calling you a shitty parent, but I'm kind of calling you a shitty parent because it's been all over the news. 150 million children play Roblox. Someone built a simulation that allows children to play out the Sandy Hook shooting. The one where 20 children died ages 6 and 7.
The themes both projects were working with, online grooming, predators on gaming platforms, and the specific vulnerability of young people who share personal information in spaces that don't have adequate moderation, weren't fictional in the way the characters were fictional. Could Systix be using the horror genre to build a case study in how predation actually works? MOVEmily addressed everything from the patient trust building to the platform hopping to the documentation of obsession. And he was presenting it in a format that the demographic most likely to encounter those risks, young people on YouTube and Roblox, was most likely to engage with. But then again, the casual tone Emily used when she said there was nothing wrong with visiting an online friend may be misleading to a younger, more naive audience.
After that, Josh dropped me off at home and said he'd be back. When we meet up again, I'll definitely make a part 2 for this video. Meeting an online friend for the first time can be scary, but I hope this showed you there's nothing to worry about. Anyway, thank you all for watching.
Curious, I know, but that's the thing with every ARG. You never really know what the developer has in mind, and you're completely free to pick the version of events you prefer for the story. The MOVEmily channel is still up. The 5 videos are still there in order. There's been no updated description clarifying it's an art project. The channel just stopped, the way a channel might stop if something had happened to the person running it and new viewers are finding it every day.